Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge, as we continue our series of SEC team preview podcasts. Today, we are talking about the Oklahoma Sooners. Welcome to the SEC Oklahoma. We did this with Texas a few episodes ago. Now we're on to Oklahoma, one of the newbies to the SEC. And I guess that's where we will start.
Yeah.
As far as Oklahoma goes, is that I've said this before on the podcast, but again, I'll repeat myself in case we have some Oklahoma fans who are just now kind of jumping on board. When Texas and Oklahoma were announced to be moving to the SEC, I thought, okay, Texas will be fine. You know, it'll be a tough road, but they're right there. And I kind of worried about Oklahoma at the time because don't forget, the announcement was made in 2021, and which is so funny because like Cal and Stanford announced they were going to the ACC and then were in the ACC like less than a year later. And so it seems kind of quaint that Texas and Oklahoma announced that they're going to the SEC back in 2021 and then waited 3 years or 3.5, whatever it was. Anyway, but I worried a little bit about Oklahoma because it was before they went to Omaha and came, a couple wins away from a national title in 2022. It's, before they won the Big 12 again in 2024. And before they announced improvements to L. Dale Mitchell, their home ballpark. That was before all of that. So I thought, man, that might be a rude awakening for Oklahoma because at that point they'd been kind of inconsistent. They'd had some decent teams under Skip. They'd had some not so great teams under Skip. I just didn't know if they were going to be ready to cut it. And now I'm confident. We'll see how well they cut it, but I no longer worry about just them generally competing in the SEC in a way that I did a little bit when they first got announced a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's an established track record. I mean, winning the Big 12 last year. I mean, you mentioned the trip to the College World Series finals. It's a program with some helium, and they have definitely shown that they can compete at the top levels of the sport. And now they're, it's the venues are different. The players might be a little bit different as well, but you're going to get to you need to see how you stack up with, in the top conference in the sport. And I do think that on the mound, I'm really excited about what the potential for Oklahoma to just come in. And, when you have elite arms, that is, that's levels the playing field significantly. And they certainly, at least on paper, appear to be well furnished on the mound heading into the season. The question will be, they lost a lot of offensive production. So who fills those spots? How productive are they? Can they hit enough home runs? Because as we talked about, this is a league that has become certainly homer heavy. A lot of 3-run bombs in the SEC. How well suited is this Oklahoma lineup going to be to match that? And certainly, if you pitch well enough, you can mitigate that quite a bit. But we've said this with other teams: if you have to work really hard to scratch through, and then you give up all of that hard work on one swing, it can be really demoralizing. So that's what as I look at this Oklahoma lineup. I think they're going to be able to scratch and score and be aggressive and things like that. But where's that big swing going to come from? And if you're able to develop that and have somebody emerge that maybe we don't know about yet, then that really changes where I see the ceiling for this team, because with the way that they're situated from a rotation standpoint, if all of those pitchers pitch to their ability, it's as good as any rotation. Maybe Arkansas's is better, but this is a really, scouts are going to love going to Norman because you're going to have, 3 premium arms on the rotation. If it's Kyson Witherspoon, Malachi Witherspoon, and Cam Johnson, that's 3 potential first rounders if they pitch to their ability. So that's really exciting. If you're a guy who loves to see the dominant starter, it's legit, man. I mean, this guy, for them is Omaha, and this is a program. once you got there, if you got those pitchers and you got all the off days and things like that, you'd feel really good about your chances.
Yeah, I think you could feel two ways about with Oklahoma on the mound. I agree with you totally that the talent is off the charts good. But I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you can feel two different ways about Cam Johnson, where it is exciting because obviously the arm talent is incredible and the ceiling is incredibly high. And that's, that can be a game changing arm on the mound for them. The flip side is it went beyond just the physical stuff last year for LSU. Like there was clearly, like, it wasn't just that, oh, he's just, not throwing enough strikes. The stuff isn't as good as we thought it was. Like it was, LSU was having to kind of try to build him up to put him in position mentally and physically on the mound. And so can you fix that in one off season? And look, Skip Johnson, incredibly well-respected and accomplished pitching coach. So if you told me that, yeah, he's really back on track, I totally believe it. But if you're an Oklahoma fan, I can understand how that would make you a little nervous that, they're going to be leaning on him. And then of course, on the third, I'm running out of hands on one hand. On the other hand, on this third hand I have apparently,
top of your head.
Because they have the Witherspoon brothers, who you kind of know what you're going to get from. It does make it to where, like, look, they're not asking Cam Johnson to be their Friday guy. They're not necessarily asking him to be their stopper, right? So maybe it's just finding some sort of role that does work for Cam Johnson. Maybe he's not the supernova, type of left-handed arm that we thought he was going to be at LSU, and that can be okay. Like if they just find the right role for him and let him develop in it. So, yes, I'm excited about the pitching talent there, but I do wonder ultimately what we're going to get, especially from Cam Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Cam last fall, and he was dominant at LSU, and then he's had another great fall, and maybe this time he can carry that forward into the spring. Because I mean, they've also got Cade Crossland, who's a really highly regarded pitcher. I mean, you could look at maybe a piggyback role, right, where you have both of those guys available and split the game up that way, and that way, you're not asking Cam to go out and give you 6 innings, right? Maybe because he with his control problems in the past, that he's a high pitch count guy. So, as he develops, more consistency, having him maybe give you 4 is as a target. And if he's dealing, you roll with it. But that's the expectation going in. I think that might be a nice segue for him to ease into this new role. I think the other thing for them is just being able. I mean, they lost so much last year on the mound. The Witherspoon brothers are back, but everybody else who pitched a lot is pretty much moved on. So there's so many newcomers. They dipped heavily into junior college, both on the mound and positionally. So you got some older players who are coming in, but still this is a really high level to compete. So there's an adjustment for a lot of these kids. So I think they'll go as far if those elite arms, or pitch up to their capabilities. This is an Omaha team potentially. Otherwise, they're going to be fighting and clawing every weekend. They're going to be in a lot of games, but it's also a team that could struggle in their first year in the SEC is they understand what all these road trips are going to be about, and playing in front of crazy fans and big stadiums and all of that kind of stuff that you have some of in the Big 12. You just don't have every single weekend. So that'll be some of the adjustment. But it's exciting, right? You want this if you're you're an elite competitor. You want to play in these venues. You want to see these great arms and face these great hitters. And this is, I mean, if I'm an Oklahoma guy, I'm really fired up about moving in and just what's laying ahead of you. I mean, we talked about this before, the home schedule where you got 4 of the last 5 national championships are coming to your national champions are coming to your place. And then your other of your 5 home conference series is Texas. So you should be able to to pack that place, and I think they'll be ready for it as these top programs come in.
Yeah, given the excitement, just around the SEC and the teams that are going to be coming in, those renovations to their ballpark, not a
Mm-hmm.
moment too soon. Certainly,
Mm-hmm.
we alluded to it a little bit, but the position player group, like obviously on
Yeah.
paper, looks a little light. There's a couple things there. I mean, one is that Easton Carmichael's probably a better bat than he gets credit for nationally. One of the better pure hitters in college baseball last season. A guy that hit
Mm-hmm.
366 and has some pop, but certainly he's gonna work some counts. But yeah, there's a lot of turnover there generally. You get back Jackson Willits, who hit 10 home runs, but otherwise
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at a lot of new faces. But I will say it is an exciting group of young players, and given the way that Oklahoma likes to play, I do think it's a team that can play that style pretty effectively. When you talk about Dawson Willis, a JUCO transfer from LSU, Eunice, who's just a
Mm-hmm.
like a wiry, strong, lanky infielder who can run a little bit and has some line drive pop, or some of the freshmen like Kyle Branch, frankly, has gotten a lot of buzz in the fall for what he's going to bring
Yeah.
to the table, perhaps even more so than Drew Dickerson, who was the big name guy that Oklahoma got. He was kind of the more
Mm-hmm.
famous of their prospects, and he's an exciting player in his own right. But really, there was as much buzz about Branch and then Willis as a JUCO transfer as there was about Dickerson early on. But the fact that that's the case tells you that this is a pretty exciting group of position players, and that's even before you talk about some of the returners. Like Jason Walk is a guy is probably gonna be their starting center fielder, a guy who can really go get it in the outfield, a guy who can be a problem on the bases for people. So this has been true of Oklahoma for a little bit. They had some more thump last year than they've had, but generally speaking, this era of Oklahoma baseball, like they're going to go as their offense is going to be able to make things happen on the bases. The degree to which they do that
Yeah.
well is going to be a big factor for them offensively in a year when it just looks a little light on paper.
Yeah. And honestly, there's styles make fights, and there are going to be some teams that you can put pressure on and be really aggressive, and that's going to work out great for you, because SEC teams don't see this a ton, right? Kentucky kind of did some of it. Vandy has done it. Missouri has done it at times, but Oklahoma's doing it with some really premium athletes. A guy I'm really fascinated to see is Brandon Kane. Mobile kid, from down the street here. He's a super athlete. He's got some juice too. He could be a kind of a dual threat kind of guy, with power and speed. For Braden Horton, could be he could be an impact transfer. You're looking for him to come in and help out, along with Jackson Willits is a guy who played a good bit last year. I think he's you hope that all those at bats you gained during your initial season as a starter, you elevate the following year, and he certainly showed a lot of potential last year. So those are some of them. I mean, Dayton Taki is another one. Maybe he can give you a little thump. He's going to get a shot at first base. I do think that those are the players that they're going to need to be more of a doubles, take the extra base kind of team, at least early, while they figure out where that thump's going to come from, as we talked about. I think it's really challenging without those, other than Carmichael, without those big, thumpers in the middle. But we'll see. It's a blank slate. Just because you played one way, 1 year doesn't mean you're always that same guy. So people are going to get better, and teams are, a lot of times we'll go into a season with one expectation of an offense, and that's not what materializes. So I'm really fired up to see what Oklahoma looks like this year. And actually, I'm also excited. I'm going to go to Norman for the first time and see a game. I'm going to see their home opening weekend where they play Mississippi State. So excited just to kind of get an in-person look what their program's about and what kind of fan support they're going to have. Because I would think opening weekend and you got a program like Mississippi State, opening home weekend, I'll be there on a Saturday, so I would think that'll be a pretty wild atmosphere.
I would think so as well. I mean, it stands out that the first few weeks of SEC play are going to be really important for this team for a couple of reasons. One is that just the simple fact of you want to get off to a decent start and not create a situation where things start to snowball on you in this league, because there aren't any get right weekends, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the Big 12, at least typically you've got a couple. Like that doesn't really exist in this league with the exception of the occasional Missouri year, if you get them at home, right? And then secondly, you look at their first couple of weekends in the league and you've got South Carolina on the road, then you mentioned Mississippi State at home, and then frankly, even Alabama on the road the following weekend. Yeah. Like those are teams that are going to be kind of in a similar place in the pecking order. And so if you come out of that at 6-3 or 5-4, as opposed to 3-6, like that can be a big difference maker in ultimately when we get to May and we're looking at Oklahoma. And are they 15-15 in the league? And hey, they're a clear regional team. And hey, if you get hot in Hoover, maybe you can host. Or is it you're 12-18 in the league and boy, you better win a couple games in Hoover because you're kind of on the outside looking in. Like those first 3 weekends, I think are going to have a lot to do with what we end up looking at come May with this team.
That's a good point. We've made a lot about with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the league, how the Texas coaching staff, they were at A&M, so they understand the rigors and the week to week. And I asked several coaches what they thought. Is that overblown, like other coaches throughout the league, having that experience within the league? Do you think it matters? And they seem to think it does. It's just, when they came in, from other places, they thought they understood, but there were still some things that just with the week to week grind, with, like you mentioned, there's no weeks off, that thing. And then just that pressure that mounts when every team has really close to equal talent with you. You can't just roll the ball out and out talent people, and that wears on you mentally as much as it does physically. So that'll be something to watch with Oklahoma. It doesn't mean they're going to get off to a slow start. It just means that maybe they overcome it, and they're able to have some early success. Because going to South Carolina, you mentioned that's going to be a big series for both teams, even though it's week 1. And then you look at all the excitement of having an SEC game on your campus, and Mississippi State's coming in and they're really good. So those will be 2 ends to follow. And then I think the other thing to think about is when you have a program that has had success before, but you're replacing so many of your players, so you really need those few that were there to be that bridge and show people, okay, this is what our standard is. And it's always fascinating to me because, it's such a transitory sport now where you're just, you got a new, it's an etch a sketch, right? And you got a new roster every year. So the holdovers, they have in my opinion, kind of an oversized importance to maintaining that culture within your program and setting that, expectations within the team. I mean, coaches can do so much. You need some player-led activities as well, and that's going to be, for Oklahoma, it's just the adjustment, right? I think in the long run they're going to be fine, but what does it look like early? And it certainly helps if you got good players and they've got their share.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's such a fascinating storyline to watch, just from the standpoint of how do you deal with something new and in a year, oh, by the way, that you're kind of rebuilding in a lot of ways. It might be different if this was an Oklahoma team that brought everybody back. You might feel
last year's team,
right. You might feel a little differently about it, but yeah. So there'll be kind of like I think we'll all be kind of looking on with rapt attention, not really sure what to expect. But that's if you're an Oklahoma fan, or certainly if you're in that dugout, that gives you a little bit of anxiety, I'm sure. But for folks like Mark and I, that's why we're going to be glued to our TVs early on in Oklahoma's SEC slate to kind of see how it goes. That is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Quick programming note, if you're an Oklahoma fan who is just jumping onto this podcast to get ready for the season, first of all, welcome. We are doing one of these episodes for every team in the SEC, so if you want to get to know your new conference mates a little bit better, we'll have an episode on every single team, so subscribe, do whatever it is you do with your podcast app to get every episode delivered directly to you, and Mark and I would be humbled and honored if you would consider a subscription to D1 Baseball's SEC Extra. You can use the code FALL20 still, even though it is very much winter outside. You can use the code FALL20 to get 20% off your annual subscription, and as we've discussed before, a little bonus for you. We launched ACC Extra at d1baseball.com. And if you get an SEC Extra subscription, even with that promo code, you will get ACC Extra with that as well. That also works the other way around. If you subscribe to ACC, you get SEC with it. So those will come as a pair. So a pretty good value there for that package. So again, Mark and I, we don't often do the direct I stumbled on this word last time, Mark. What did we land on? Direct appeal. Yes, yeah. There it was.
Right.
We don't often do the direct appeal for subscriptions here, but we'll do it now, especially because Oklahoma, y'all are new to the league, and we're excited to see y'all. We'll certainly be writing about y'all quite a bit because of the storyline of first year in the league for a program like that. So good time to jump on board if you have not already done so. Thank you to Mark for joining me as always, and thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll talk to y'all